The invitation had arrived 3 weeks ago, scented with heavy lavender and malice. The cardstock was thick, cream-coloured, and embossed with gold leaf, a stark contrast to the peeling wallpaper of Adele Vance's small, drafty apartment in the darker side of London. The Earl of Stirling requests the honour of your presence at the marriage of his daughter, Lady Cecily Stirling, to Viscount Julian Thorne. Adele had stared at the name. 6 months ago, Julian had knelt on a rug in her father's modest parlour, before her father's debts were revealed, before the scandal of bankruptcy ruined the Vance name, and sworn that he loved her for her mind, her spirit, her soul. He had held her hands and promised that money meant nothing. Then the creditors came. The Vance fortune evaporated overnight, and 3 days later, Julian stopped calling. 2 weeks after that, the engagement announcement to Cecily Stirling, the heiress to a shipping empire, appeared in the Times. He hadn't even the courage to break it off in person. He had sent a letter. "You shouldn't go, Adele," her landlady, Mrs. Higgins, had said, watching Adele pin up her hair in the cracked mirror. "It's a trap. She only invited you to gloat, to show you what she bought." "I know," Adele whispered, her fingers trembling slightly as she adjusted the only formal gown she had left, a sapphire blue silk that was 3 seasons out of fashion, but meticulously cleaned and pressed. She had spent the last of her savings on a new pair of silk gloves to hide her rough hands, roughened by the sewing work she now took in to survive. "If I don't go," Adele said, turning to face the older woman, her green eyes hardening, "it proves them right. It proves I am destroyed. I will not give Julian the satisfaction of thinking I am sitting at home weeping over him." But as the carriage, a hired hackney that smelled of damp hay, pulled up to the wrought-iron gates of the Stirling estate, Adele's bravery faltered. The estate was ablaze with light. Hundreds of gas lamps illuminated the massive stone facade. The driveway was clogged with polished black carriages, bearing the crests of the most powerful families in England. Adele could hear the swell of a string quartet drifting through the open French doors. She paid the driver, counting out her coins carefully, and stepped onto the gravel. The air smelled of expensive perfume, roasted meats, and judgment. As she ascended the grand staircase, the usher at the door, a man with a nose upturned so high he seemed to be inspecting the ceiling, paused when he saw her ticket. He looked her up and down, noting the lack of jewellery at her throat, the simple cut of her dress. "Name?" he drawled, though it was written right there. "Miss Adele Vance," she said, lifting her chin. The usher smirked. "Ah, the former acquaintance. Right this way." He didn't lead her to the main ballroom floor. Immediately, he directed her toward the side entrance, usually reserved for staff or late arrivals. Adele swallowed the lump in her throat and walked in. The ballroom was a sea of diamonds and velvet. The ceiling was painted with cherubs, and crystal chandeliers the size of carriages hung overhead. In the center of the room, under a massive arch of white roses, stood Julian. He looked handsome, devastatingly so. He wore his formal black tailcoat, his blonde hair perfectly swept back. He was laughing at something a duke was saying, a glass of champagne in his hand. He looked like a man without a care in the world. He looked like a man who had never pledged his heart to a girl named Adele. And then he saw her. His laughter died instantly. The color drained from his face, replaced by a flash of annoyance. He whispered something to the man next to him and began to weave through the crowd, not to greet her, but to intercept her. Adele stood her ground by a marble pillar, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Don't cry. Don't look down. Breathe." "Adele!" Julian hissed as he reached her. He didn't offer his hand. He looked around nervously, ensuring no one of importance was watching. "What on earth are you doing here?" Adele smoothed her gloves, forcing a polite smile. "I received an invitation, Julian. It would have been rude to decline." "It was a courtesy," Julian snapped, his voice low and venomous. "Cecily sent it as a gesture. No one expected you to actually show your face. Look at you." His eyes raked over her dress. It wasn't a look of desire anymore. It was a look of appraisal, like a merchant inspecting damaged goods. "That dress is from the '92 season. You look desperate." "I look like a woman wishing her childhood friend well," Adele lied smoothly, though the word desperate cut her like a knife. "Are you not happy, Julian? You have the fortune you so badly wanted." Julian's jaw tightened. "I did what I had to do." "You have no money, Adele. Your father left you with nothing but debt." "Did you expect me to starve with you?" "I expected you to keep your word," she whispered. Before Julian could respond, a high, tinkling laugh cut through the tension. "Julian, darling, who are you?" "Oh!" The crowd parted as Lady Cecily Sterling approached. She was a vision in white lace and pearls, her dress likely costing more than Adele's father had earned in a lifetime. She was beautiful, but her eyes were cold, hard chips of blue ice. Cecily hooked her arm possessively through Julian's. She looked at Adele with feigned delight, pitch-perfect theatricality for the audience gathering around them. "Adele Vance, you actually came?" Cecily exclaimed, loud enough for the nearby circle of aristocrats to hear. "Oh, isn't she brave, Julian?" "Very," Julian muttered, looking at the floor. "I told my mother we simply had to invite you," Cecily cooed, stepping closer. The scent of her expensive rose perfume was suffocating. I said, "Poor Adele probably hasn't had a decent meal or a party since her father's unfortunate disgrace. We wanted to give you one last taste of high society before you vanish completely." The guests nearby chuckled. A hand covered a mouth. A fan snapped open to hide a smirk. Adele felt the heat rise up her neck. This was a public execution. "Thank you for your concern, Lady Cecily," Adele said, her voice steady despite the shaking of her knees. "But I am managing quite well." "Are you?" Cecily tilted her head. She reached out and touched the fabric of Adele's sleeve, rubbing it between her thumb and forefinger with disgust. "Silk. Turned? Did you dye this yourself?" "Oh, you poor thing." "Julian, look. She's wearing her old blues." "Cecily, that's enough," Julian said. But he didn't move away. He didn't defend Adele. He just wanted the scene to end. "I just think it's sweet," Cecily said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that carried effortlessly. She came all this way to see what a real wedding looks like. "Tell me, Adele, did you bring a gift? Or is your presence the gift?" Laughter rippled through the group. Adele felt tears pricking the back of her eyes. She had brought a small, embroidered handkerchief, one she had made herself, but she suddenly felt the burning shame of it in her reticule. It was worthless here. She was worthless here. "I think I should go," Adele said quietly. She turned to leave, but the crowd was dense. She was trapped. "Oh, don't run away," Cecily called out, raising her champagne glass. "Everyone, a toast to Adele Vance, for showing us all that even when one has lost everything, dignity included, one can still crash a party." The laughter was open now. Cruel, sharp. Adele froze. She was alone. Truly, utterly alone. The man she loved was standing beside his new wife, looking at Adele with pity and embarrassment. The exit seemed miles away. The walls were closing in. She gripped the cold stone of the pillar, praying for the floor to open up and swallow her. She closed her eyes, preparing for the next insult, the next barb. But the insult never came. Instead, the laughter in the room died abruptly. It didn't taper off. It was severed, as if someone had sucked the air out of the ballroom. A heavy, suffocating silence descended, starting from the grand entrance doors and sweeping across the floor like a cold wave. Adele opened her eyes. Julian and Cecily were no longer looking at her. They were staring past her, toward the entrance, their faces pale. The crowd parted. Not the polite shuffling they had done for the bride, but a fearful, scrambling retreat. Walking through the center of the room was a man. He was tall, towering over the other guests. He wore black, not the polite evening wear of the other men, but a stark, severe black velvet that seemed to absorb the light. His shoulders were broad, his movement predatory and fluid, like a panther stalking through a garden of house cats. He had dark hair, slightly longer than was fashionable, and a sharp, aristocratic jawline. But it was his eyes that terrified people, steel grey, cold, and utterly bored. "Dear God," a woman behind Adele whispered, "it's the Duke." "I thought he was in exile," a man muttered back. "It's Blackwood, it's the Iron Duke." Valerius Blackwood, the Duke of Blackwood, the man who owned half of London and was rumoured to have destroyed 3 noble houses simply because they displeased him. He was known for his ruthlessness in business and his absolute solitude. He never attended weddings. He never attended parties. And yet, here he was. Adele pressed herself back against the pillar, hoping to remain invisible. The Duke walked straight toward the center of the room. He didn't look at the bride. He didn't look at the groom. He stopped 10 feet away. His gaze swept over the crowd, dismissing them as if they were insects. Then his eyes locked onto Adele. She stopped breathing. The Duke's gaze was intense, physical in its weight. He looked at her frayed dress. He looked at her flushed cheeks. He looked at the tears standing unshed in her eyes. He looked at Julian and Cecily, standing smugly nearby with their champagne. He seemed to calculate the entire situation in a fraction of a second. Valerius Blackwood took a step toward her. The crowd gasped. Why was the most powerful man in England walking toward the ruined girl? He stopped directly in front of her. He was so close she could smell the scent of him. Rain, sandalwood, and danger. He was terrifyingly large, blocking out the rest of the room, blocking out Julian and Cecily. Adele looked up, trembling. "Your Grace," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Valerius didn't smile. His face was a mask of cold stone, but his eyes, there was a fire in them. He reached out, his gloved hand taking hers. He didn't just hold it. He lifted it to his lips, but he didn't kiss it. He held it there, hovering, an act of supreme intimacy. He leaned down, his lips brushing the shell of her ear, shielding his words from the rest of the room. "Do not cry, little one." His voice was a deep baritone that vibrated through her chest. "They want your tears. Do not give them a single drop." Adele stared at him, stunned. "Who?" she stammered. "Listen to me," he whispered, his grip on her hand tightening just enough to ground her. "That boy over there is a fool who traded a diamond for a glass of water. And that woman is a vulture." He pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes with an intensity that made her knees weak. "I am going to save you, Adele Vance," he said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper that only she could hear. "But you must follow my lead. Right now. Without hesitation." "Why?" she breathed. "Because." A dark smirk touched the corner of his mouth. "I hate weddings, and I love chaos." He straightened up, turning his back on her slightly to address the room, but keeping her hand firmly tucked into the crook of his arm. The silence stretched. "Valerius," Julian stammered, stepping forward, trying to regain control. "Your Grace, we didn't expect you." The Duke looked at Julian as if he were a smudge on his boot. "Evidently. The champagne is warm, and the company is lacking." He turned his gaze back to Adele, and his expression shifted. The coldness vanished, replaced by a look of warm, adoring familiarity that shocked Adele to her core. It was a perfect performance. "Adele, my dear," Valerius said, his voice carrying clearly to the back of the room. "I apologize for being late. I got held up at the palace. I told the Queen I simply had to leave to escort you." The room erupted in gasps. "The Queen? Escort her?" Adele started, but Valerius squeezed her hand. "Pretend you're mine," he whispered, barely moving his lips. Then, louder, "You haven't told them yet, have you?" Adele shook her head, mute with shock. Valerius smiled, a predatory, triumphant smile. He looked at Cecily, who looked like she had swallowed a lemon. "Good," Valerius said. "I prefer to announce it myself." He turned to the crowd. "Viscount Thorn, Lady Cecily, thank you for hosting us. But I am afraid Adele cannot stay long. It is tiresome for my future Duchess to be surrounded by such mediocrity." "Future Duchess." The glass slipped from Cecily's hand and shattered on the floor. The silence that followed Valerius's declaration was so profound that the popping of a champagne cork in the distance sounded like a gunshot. Cecily Sterling was staring at the shattered glass at her feet, her mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. Julian looked as though he had been struck physically in the chest. His eyes darted from the Duke's impassive face to Adele's pale one. "Duchess?" Julian choked out, his voice cracking. That is impossible. Adele has nothing. She is mine," Valerius cut him off, his voice bored but lethal. "And I would advise you, Thorn, to be careful how you speak of the future mistress of Blackwood Hall. My temper is famously short." The orchestra, sensing the impending disaster and perhaps fearing for their own livelihoods, frantically struck up a waltz. It was Strauss, loud and sweeping, an attempt to drown out the scandal. "Dance with me," Valerius murmured to Adele. It wasn't a request. Before she could protest, his arm tightened around her waist, a band of iron masked in velvet. He swept her onto the empty floor. Adele stumbled slightly, her head spinning, but Valerius caught her effortlessly. He moved with a grace that defied his size. Within seconds, they were spinning in the center of the ballroom, the only couple moving, surrounded by hundreds of eyes. "Smile," Valerius whispered, his face dangerously close to hers. His grey eyes were locked onto hers, burning with intensity. "You look like you're going to the gallows. You're supposed to be in love." I can't breathe," Adele gasped, her hand clutching the lapel of his black coat. "What have you done? Why did you say that?" Valerius spun her around, his hand firm on the small of her back. "I just saved you from social annihilation. You should be thanking me." "You lied to the entire peerage of England," Adele hissed, forcing a stiff smile as they whirled past a group of gossiping duchesses. "They will find out, and when they do, I will be worse off than before. I will be a laughingstock and a liar." "Only if we fail," Valerius said calmly, "and I never fail." "Why?" she demanded, looking up at him. "Why me? You don't know me. You are the Duke of Blackwood. You could have any woman in this room." Valerius looked over her head at the crowd, his expression hardened. "Look at them, Adele. Vultures. If I chose a woman from this room, she would want my title, my money, or my influence. Her father would try to control my estates. Her mother would try to redecorate my homes. I need a wife who wants none of those things. He looked back down at her. I need a shield. And you? You need a sword. Adele faltered. A sword? Julian Thorne destroyed you tonight, Valerius said, his voice dropping to a low growl that sent shivers down her spine. He invited you here to bleed you dry of your dignity, to feed his own ego. He wanted to show his new wife that he made the right choice by discarding you. Adele felt the sting of tears again, but she blinked them back. I know. So, Valerius continued, pulling her closer, minimizing the space between them until their bodies brushed. I am giving you the chance to strike back. Look at him. Adele turned her head slightly. Julian was standing on the edge of the dance floor. He wasn't looking at his bride. He was watching Adele in the arms of the Duke, his face twisted with a mixture of shock, jealousy, and greed. He looked small, petty. He is jealous, Valerius noted with satisfaction. Men like him only want what another man values. Now that I have claimed you, suddenly you are the most precious thing in the world to him. This is cruel, Adele whispered, though a dark part of her heart flared with satisfaction. This is justice, Valerius corrected. Pretend for tonight. Walk out of here on my arm. Let them wonder. Let them fear. And tomorrow we discuss the terms of your employment. Adele missed a step. Employment? Keep dancing, he commanded softly. Don't break the illusion. The waltz ended with a flourish. Valerius dipped her, a move so theatrical and romantic that the room actually gasped. As he held her there, suspended above the floor, his face inches from hers, he whispered, Excellent performance, Miss Vance. Now, let's make our exit before the bride decides to throw a knife. He pulled her upright. Adele felt dizzy, her blood singing in her veins. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like the poor, bankrupt spinster. She felt powerful. Valerius tucked her hand into the crook of his arm. Chin up. Walk like you own the floor, because right now, standing next to me, you do. They began the long walk to the exit. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. No one dared to insult her now. The women who had laughed at her dress were now eyeing it with envy, wondering if vintage silk was the new trend. The men bowed respectfully to the Duke. They were 5 steps from the door when a voice called out. Wait! It was Julian. He broke away from Cecily's grip and ran towards them, his face flushed. Valerius stopped and turned slowly, raising a single arrogant eyebrow. Viscount Thorne, is there a problem? Julian ignored the Duke and looked frantically at Adele. Adele, you can't go with him. You don't know him. He's dangerous. Everyone says so. And you are safe, Julian? Adele asked, her voice surprisingly steady. Safe enough to abandon me when I needed you most? Safe enough to invite me here to be mocked? I didn't mean for it to go that far, Julian pleaded, reaching for her hand. Valerius stepped between them. He didn't touch Julian. He didn't have to. The sheer menace radiating from him was enough to make Julian recoil. Touch her, Valerius said, his voice terrifyingly quiet, and you will lose that hand. Julian paled. Your Grace, you don't understand. She is destitute. She has debts. Her father died owing thousands. You are making a mistake. Valerius laughed. It was a dark, dry sound. Money? You think I care about money? I could buy your entire estate with the loose change in my pocket, Thorne. Whatever debts she has are mine now. He turned to Adele, his eyes softening for the audience. Are you ready to go home, my love? Yes, Adele said, and for the first time that night, she smiled, a genuine, sharp smile directed right at Julian. "Goodbye, Julian. Enjoy your wedding." She turned her back on him. Valerius led her out into the cool night air, leaving the heat and the humiliation behind. The Duke's carriage was not a hired hackney. It was a massive, sleek black vehicle, pulled by 4 midnight black horses. A footman in silver-trimmed livery opened the door. Instantly, Valerius helped Adele inside. The interior was lined with crushed velvet and smelled of leather and expensive tobacco. He climbed in opposite her and signaled the driver. The carriage lurched forward, the gravel crunching beneath the wheels as they sped away from the Sterling estate. For a long time, there was silence. Adele sat huddled in the corner, the adrenaline fading, replaced by a cold dread. The reality of what had just happened crashed down on her. She was alone in a carriage with the Iron Duke, a man rumoured to be heartless. Valerius watched her from the shadows. He reached up and loosened his cravat, his posture relaxing from the rigid aristocrat to something more weary and human. "You can stop trembling," he said. "I don't bite, unless provoked." Adele straightened her spine. "Where are you taking me? My apartment is in East London. It's nowhere near your estate." "I know where you live," Valerius said calmly. "Number 4, Weaver's Lane, above the bakery. It smells of yeast and damp." Adele stiffened. "You investigated me?" "I investigate everyone," he replied. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a silver flask. He took a sip and offered it to her. She shook her head. "Why?" she asked again. "You said you needed a shield. But why me?" "Specifically?" Valerius capped the flask. "Because, Adele Vance, you are invisible. Since your father's bankruptcy, society has erased you. You have no powerful family to demand things of me. You have no scandalous lovers, except that fool back there. You are intelligent. I saw your father's library before it was sold. And most importantly," he leaned forward, the gaslight from the street flickering across his sharp features. "Most importantly, you are desperate, and desperate people are loyal." Adele felt a flash of anger. "I am not a stray dog to be collected." "No," Valerius agreed. "You are a woman drowning. I am offering you a life raft, but it comes with a price." "I won't be your mistress," Adele said firmly, clutching her reticule. "If that is what this is, if you think you bought me—" Valerius let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Mistress? Good God, no. I have no interest in seduction, Miss Vance. My life is complicated enough without adding romance to it. This is a business transaction." He reached into a hidden compartment in the carriage wall and pulled out a folded document. He tossed it onto the seat beside her. "What is this?" she asked. "A contract." Adele hesitated, then picked it up. The light was dim, but she could make out the bold header. "Betrothal agreement." "Here is the deal," Valerius said, his voice turning crisp and professional. "My grandmother, the Dowager Duchess, is dying. Her one wish is to see me settled before she passes. Furthermore, there is a certain persistent Austrian princess that the Queen is trying to force me to marry for political reasons. An alliance I have no desire to make." He looked out the window, his jaw tightening. "I need a fiancé, someone respectable enough to pass, but insignificant enough that the Queen won't view her as a political threat. Someone I can control." "And that's me," Adele said quietly. "Insignificant. To them, yes. To me, you are the solution." He turned back to her. "You will pose as my fiancé for 6 months. You will live at Blackwood Hall. You will attend events on my arm. You will pretend to adore me. And after 6 months, we will stage a frantic, heartbreaking breakup. I will claim I am too damaged for your pure heart, or some such nonsense. You will leave. And I go back to my peeling wallpaper and my sewing? Adele asked bitterly. No, Valerius said. Look at the last page. Adele flipped to the back of the document. Her eyes widened. In exchange for her services, the Duke of Blackwood agrees to settle all outstanding debts of the late Jonathan Vance. Furthermore, upon the termination of the engagement, Miss Vance will receive the deed to the Rosewood cottage in Sussex and a stipend of $5,000 per annum for life. Adele gasped. £5,000? That was a fortune. It was independence. It was safety. It was a life she never dreamed she could have again. You would do all this just to avoid a marriage? She asked, stunned. I would pay double, Valerius muttered darkly. Freedom is expensive, Adele. He watched her face. So? Do we have an accord? Or shall I have the driver turn around and drop you back at the wedding so you can beg Julian for scraps? Adele looked at the contract, then at the man sitting opposite her. He was arrogant, terrifying and manipulative, but he was offering her a sword when everyone else had offered her pity. She thought of Cecily's laugh. She thought of Julian's cowardice. She thought of the cold winters in her drafty apartment. Slowly, Adele folded the paper. I have conditions, she said. Valerius looked surprised. A flicker of amusement crossed his eyes. Conditions? You are negotiating with the devil, Miss Vance. If I am to play your Duchess, I will not be treated like an employee in public, she said, her voice strengthening. I will not be dismissed or talked down to. If we are to convince them, we must be partners. And I want my father's pocket watch back. It was sold to a pawnbroker on Fleet Street. Valerius stared at her for a long moment. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Adele held her breath, wondering if she had pushed too far. Then, slowly, a genuine smile spread across Valerius's face. It transformed him, softening the harsh lines of his face, making him devastatingly handsome. Done, he said. He extended his hand. Adele took it. His skin was warm, his grip firm. Welcome to the House of Blackwood, Adele, he said. Try not to. Let the ghosts scare you. Ghosts? Adele blinked. Metaphorical ones, he said, pulling his hand back. Mostly. The carriage slowed as they approached a massive iron gate. They weren't going to her apartment. They were going to his London townhouse, a palace in its own right. As the gates creaked open, Adele looked out the window. She had entered the lion's den willingly. But as she glanced back at Valerius, who was already reviewing some papers he had pulled from his coat, she realized something. She wasn't just a prop. She was a player in the game now. One more thing, Valerius said without looking up. Yes? Tomorrow we go to the dressmaker. Burn that blue dress. It offends me. It was my favorite, Adele defended. It smells of the past, Valerius said, looking her in the eye. And we are done with the past. The carriage stopped. The door opened. Coming, darling? Valerius mocked gently, extending his hand again. Adele took a deep breath. She took his hand and stepped out into the dark, glittering night of her new life. But as they walked up the steps to the massive doors of Blackwood House, Adele noticed a shadow moving in the garden across the street. A figure watching. Valerius noticed it too. His body tensed, shielding her slightly. Who is that? Adele whispered. Trouble, Valerius murmured. Get inside, Adele. The game has already started. The first week at Blackwood Hall was a blur of silk, velvet, and terror. The house was not a home. It was a fortress. The corridors were lined with portraits of Valerius's ancestors, men with hard eyes and women who looked as though they had never smiled. The staff moved like ghosts, efficient and silent. They addressed Adele as Miss Vance, but there was a shift in their tone. They had seen the way the Duke looked at her. Valerius had kept his word. The morning after the wedding, a legion of dressmakers, milliners, and shoemakers arrived. They did not ask Adele what she wanted. They took measurements and obeyed the Duke's commands. "Dark colours," Valerius had ordered, leaning against the doorframe of the morning room, watching Adele stand on a stool while a seamstress pinned emerald velvet around her waist. "Jewel tones. She is not a debutante to be dressed in pastels. She is a woman." Adele caught his eye in the mirror. "You speak of me as if I am a racehorse. You are grooming." "A racehorse implies I intend to gamble with you," Valerius countered smoothly. "I intend to win. There is a difference." But the true test came on the 5th day. Adele was in the library, trying to read a book on political history. Valerius had insisted she understand the current tensions with Austria, when the heavy oak doors creaked open. Valerius entered. He looked tired. There were shadows under his eyes, but his posture was as rigid as ever. "Put the book down," he said. "The final boss has arrived." Adele frowned. "The Austrian princess?" "Worse," Valerius grimaced. "My grandmother." The Dowager Duchess Helena of Blackwood was a legend in London. It was said she had once made a prime minister cry simply by raising an eyebrow. She was 80 years old, confined to a wheelchair, and possessed a mind as sharp as a guillotine. "She is in the blue drawing room," Valerius said, adjusting his cuffs. "She wants to meet the woman who finally ensnared me. If she smells fear, she will eat you alive. If she smells deceit, she will destroy us both." Adele's stomach twisted. "What do I do?" Valerius stepped closer. He reached out and tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His touch was lingering, warm. "Be the woman who stood up to me in the carriage. Be the woman who survived poverty with her head held high. Do not bow to her, Adele. Blackwoods do not bow." They walked into the drawing room together. The room was freezing. The fire was unlit. Sitting by the window, wrapped in furs, was a tiny, withered woman with eyes like black beads. "So," the dowager croaked, her voice like cracking parchment. "This is the creature." Adele curtsied, deep, respectful, but elegant. "Your Grace." The dowager looked her up and down. "Skinny, pale. I heard you were bankrupt, girl. Are you here for my grandson's money?" Valerius stiffened beside her, opening his mouth to defend her. But Adele spoke first. "Yes," Adele said clearly. The room went silent. Valerius looked at her, shocked. Adele stepped forward, meeting the old woman's gaze. "I have no money, Your Grace. If I married a pauper, I would starve. If I marry your grandson, I will be safe. I would be a liar if I said his fortune was irrelevant." "But," Adele paused, her voice softening, "I could have married a rich merchant who would bore me to death. I chose your grandson because he is the only man in England who terrifies everyone else, but makes me feel safe." It was a lie, mostly, but it was the kind of truth the dowager respected. The old woman stared at her for a long, agonizing minute. Then she let out a cackle. "Honesty," the dowager cackled. "How refreshing. The last girl he brought home told me she loved him for his soul. I nearly vomited." The dowager waved a hand. "Come here, girl. Sit by me. Valerius, go away. I want to see if she has a brain or just a pretty face." Valerius looked at Adele. She gave him a small nod. He bowed and left the room. For an hour, the dowager grilled Adele. She asked about politics, about literature, about the scandal of her father's bankruptcy. Adele answered everything with calm dignity. She didn't make excuses. She didn't cry. Finally, the dowager leaned back. "You'll do. You're tough. Life has beaten you, and you didn't break. Valerius needs that. He is brittle. He thinks he is iron, but iron snaps if you hit it hard enough. He needs steel. She grabbed Adele's wrist with a claw-like hand. He is in love with you, you know. Adele froze. We have only been together a short time. I have known that boy since he was in napkins, the dowager snapped. I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. He watches the door when you leave the room. He protects you like a dragon guarding gold. Don't break his heart, girl, or I will come back from the grave to haunt you. Adele swallowed hard. I won't, Your Grace. As she left the room, her heart was pounding. He is in love with you. It was impossible. It was a contract, a deal. But as she walked down the hall, she found Valerius waiting for her. He wasn't working. He was just leaning against the wall, waiting. When he saw her, he let out a breath he seemed to have been holding. "Did you survive?" he asked. "She likes me," Adele said, still dazed. "She thinks I'm steel." Valerius smiled, a genuine, dazzling smile that reached his eyes. He walked over and took her hand, raising it to his lips. "She's right," he murmured against her skin. And in that moment, Adele realized the terrifying truth. The dowager was wrong about one thing. It wasn't just Valerius who was in danger of falling. Adele was already slipping. 2 weeks later, the invitation arrived. It was not a wedding invitation this time. It was the gala at the Royal Opera House, the highlight of the social season. Every person of consequence would be there. "This is the debut," Valerius said, tossing the invitation onto the breakfast table. "Tonight, we show the world that you are the Duchess of Blackwood in all but name." Adele felt a knot of anxiety. Will they be there? The Sterlings, Julian and Cecily? Valerius buttered his toast calmly. "Undoubtedly. They have returned from their honeymoon. I hear it was miserable. Apparently, Cecily spends more money than she has, and Julian is realizing that marrying a bank account is very boring conversation." "I do not wish to see them," Adele whispered. "Good," Valerius said, "because tonight they will not see the victim. They will see the Queen." That evening, Adele understood what he meant. The dress Valerius had commissioned for this night was a weapon. It was deep crimson velvet, off the shoulder, fitted to perfection. It was bold, scandalous, and regal. Around her neck, Valerius clasped a necklace of rubies and diamonds that was so heavy it felt like a yoke. "The Blackwood rubies," he said, fastening the clasp. His fingers brushed the nape of her neck, sending a shiver down her spine. "These haven't been worn since my mother died. Wearing them is a statement. It says you are permanent." He turned her to face the mirror. Adele gasped. She didn't recognize herself. The scared girl in the blue silk was gone. A dangerous woman stared back. "You are breathtaking," Valerius whispered. His voice was rough. He wasn't looking at the mirror. He was looking at her. The air between them crackled with electricity. For a second, Adele thought he might kiss her. He leaned in, his eyes dropping to her lips. Then he pulled back, his mask of indifference slamming back into place. The carriage waits. The opera house was a frenzy of light and noise. When Valerius and Adele entered their private box, every opera glass in the house turned toward them. The murmur of the crowd was like the buzzing of bees. Adele sat in the velvet chair, her back straight. Valerius sat close to her, his arm resting on the back of her chair, a possessive shield. Across the theatre, in the box opposite, sat Julian and Cecily. Cecily looked pale and angry. Julian looked haunted. He couldn't take his eyes off Adele. even from this distance, she could feel his stare. It was hungry. During the intermission, Valerius went to get them drinks. "Stay here," he ordered. "Do not open the door for anyone." But moments after he left, there was a knock, a frantic, hurried knock. "Adele! Adele, please, it's Julian!" Adele's heart stopped. She shouldn't answer, but the desperation in his voice made her curious. She stood up and cracked the door open. Julian pushed his way in. He looked disheveled. He smelled of brandy. "You have to stop this," Julian hissed, closing the door behind him. "Take it off." "Excuse me?" Adele stepped back. "The necklace." Julian pointed at the rubies. "Everyone is talking about it. They say he's going to marry you." "You can't marry him, Adele. He's a monster. He's cold. He doesn't love you." "And you did?" Adele asked, her voice icy. "You loved me so much you left me for a shipping company." "I made a mistake." Julian grabbed her shoulders. "I see that now. Cecily she is cruel. She is empty. Every time I look at her, I miss you. I miss your laugh. I miss your softness." He pulled her closer. "It's not too late. Leave him. I have money now. I can set you up in a house. You can be my companion. I will take care of you." Adele stared at him in horror. "You want me to be your mistress, while you stay married to Cecily?" "It's the best of both worlds," Julian pleaded, his eyes wet. "We belong together, Adele. You know we do. Valerius is just using you. Once he gets what he wants, he will discard you. Get your hands off her." The voice came from the doorway. It was low, calm, and absolutely terrifying. Julian froze. He dropped his hands and spun around. Valerius stood in the doorway. He held 2 glasses of champagne. He looked perfectly relaxed, but his eyes were black with rage. "Your Grace," Julian stammered. "I was just catching up." Valerius walked into the box. He set the glasses down on a table with a deliberate clink. Then he walked over to Julian. He didn't shout. He didn't punch him. He simply loomed over him, radiating a violence that made the air heavy. "I told you once," Valerius said softly. "Touch her, and you lose the hand." "I didn't hurt her," Julian squeaked. "You insulted her," Valerius corrected. "I heard you. You offered her a house? You offered to make her your whore?" Valerius laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "You idiot. You offer her a shack, while I offer her an empire. You offer her secrecy, while I offer her the world." He grabbed Julian by the lapels of his coat and slammed him against the wall of the box. The sound was masked by the orchestra tuning up below. "Listen closely, Thorn," Valerius whispered into Julian's terrified face. "Adele is not your past. She is my future. If you ever approach her again, if you ever look at her with anything other than respectful fear, I will bankrupt you. I will buy every debt you have, every loan you take, and I will crush you into dust. Do you understand?" "Yes," Julian gasped. "Yes, Your Grace." "Get out." Valerius released him. Julian stumbled, straightened his coat, and fled the box without looking back. Adele stood there, shaking. Valerius didn't look at her immediately. He took a deep breath, adjusting his cuffs, trying to regain his composure. When he finally turned to her, the anger in his eyes faded, replaced by concern. "Did he hurt you?" "No," Adele whispered. "I should have killed him," Valerius muttered. "I should have thrown him over the balcony." He walked over to her. "Adele, I am sorry. I shouldn't have left you alone." "Valerius," she said, her voice trembling. "What you said about the future, about the empire." Valerius looked away. "I was making a point. I was scaring him." "Was that all it was?" Adele asked, stepping closer. She placed a hand on his chest. She could feel his heart hammering against his ribs. It wasn't the heart of a cold monster. It was the heart of a man who was afraid. "Valerius, tell me the truth." He looked down at her. The barriers were crumbling. The pretend was fading. "I cannot offer you love, Adele," he said hoarsely. "I don't know how. I am broken. My father was a tyrant. My mother died of loneliness. I don't know how to be warm." "You are warm to me," she whispered. "Because you are the only fire I have ever found," he confessed. He leaned in. This time he didn't stop. His lips met hers. It wasn't a tentative kiss. It was desperate, hungry, consuming. It was the kiss of a man who had been starving for a lifetime. Adele kissed him back, wrapping her arms around his neck, the heavy rubies pressing into her skin. For a moment, the world didn't exist. The opera didn't exist. The contract didn't exist. But then, the door to their box burst open again. They broke apart, breathing heavily. Standing in the doorway was not Julian. It was the royal guard. A man in a red uniform with gold braiding stepped forward, looking grave. "Your Grace," the captain said, bowing stiffly. "I apologize for the interruption." Valerius stepped in front of Adele, shielding her instantly. "Captain, what is the meaning of this?" "I have a summons," the captain said, holding out a sealed scroll. "From Her Majesty, the Queen." Valerius took the scroll. He broke the wax seal and read it. His face went pale. "What is it?" Adele asked, terrified. Valerius crushed the paper in his hand. He looked at Adele, his eyes full of a new kind of fear. "The Queen knows," he whispered. "Knows what?" "She knows about the contract," Valerius said grimly. "Someone told her. Someone betrayed us. She is demanding we appear at the palace immediately to prove the legitimacy of our engagement." "And if we can't?" Adele asked. "Then I am stripped of my title for deceiving the crown," Valerius said. "And you will be sent to prison for fraud." Adele grabbed his arm. "Who told her? Who knew?" Valerius looked at the empty corridor where Julian had fled. "Thorn," he growled. "He didn't just want you back. He wanted revenge." Valerius turned to her, his expression fierce. "Adele, listen to me. We have to go to the palace. We have to lie to the Queen of England. And we have to be perfect. If you falter, if you hesitate, we lose everything." "I won't falter," Adele said, though her legs were shaking. She touched the rubies at her throat. "I am the Duchess of Blackwood. Let them try to break me." Valerius took her hand. "Then let's go to war, my love." The private audience chamber of Buckingham Palace was silent as a tomb. Queen Victoria sat upon a velvet chair, her expression unreadable. To the side stood Julian Thorne, looking smug, holding a sealed letter. "Viscount Thorne alleges," the Queen said, her voice sharp, "that you, Lord Blackwood, have hired this woman to deceive the crown. He claims Miss Vance confessed to him at the opera that it is all a charade." Valerius stepped forward, his body shielding Adele. "Thorne is a liar, Your Majesty. He is a bitter man who discarded a diamond and is now angry that I picked it up." "Then explain this," the Queen gestured to the letter. "He claims there is a contract." Adele felt the blood drain from her face. If they searched Blackwood Hall, they would find it. Valerius opened his mouth to take the blame, to claim he forced her, but Adele squeezed his hand. She stepped out from behind him. She didn't bow to Julian. She looked straight at the Queen. "There was an arrangement, Your Majesty," Adele said, her voice ringing clear. Valerius stiffened, but she continued. "I came to the Duke with nothing. He offered me safety. But what started as an arrangement changed. Tonight, Julian begged me to be his mistress. I refused, because I would rather be the Duke's false wife than the Viscount's true secret. Adele turned to Valerius, tears in her eyes. I don't care about the contract, Valerius. I tear it up in my heart every day. I love you. Not the Duke. You. The room went deadly still. Valerius looked at her, his mask completely gone, revealing raw, naked hope. The Queen stared at them. Then she turned to Julian. Viscount Thorn, you said she was a cold schemer, yet she looks at him with more devotion than I have seen in this court in years. The Queen stood up. Love is not a crime, Viscount, but wasting my time is. Get out of my sight before I strip you of your rank. Julian turned pale, bowed hastily, and fled, his revenge turning into ash. Later that night, back at Blackwood Hall, the library was lit only by the fireplace. Valerius held the physical paper, the contract, in his hands. You took a great risk, Valerius said softly. I told the truth, Adele replied, walking toward him. Valerius looked at the paper, then at her. This document says you leave in 6 months. Yes, Adele whispered. Then it is incorrect. Valerius tossed the contract into the fire. They watched the flames curl around the pages, burning the terms, the conditions, and the lies. He dropped to one knee, taking her hand. The Iron Duke, the most feared man in London, was trembling. Adele Vance, I cannot offer you a job anymore, he said, pulling a ring from his pocket, a massive diamond that caught the firelight. But I can offer you my heart, my name, and my soul. Will you marry me? For real this time? Adele smiled, tears spilling over. Yes, Valerius, I will. As he kissed her, the shadows of the room seemed to retreat, chased away by the warmth of a love that was no longer pretend. And that is the story of Adele and the Iron Duke. From being humiliated at her ex's wedding to becoming the most powerful duchess in England, Adele proved that the best revenge isn't anger, it's happiness. What do you think? Did Julian deserve a harsher punishment, or was seeing Adele happy the ultimate defeat? And would you have signed that contract with the Duke? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of romance, betrayal, and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss our next dramatic story. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.